How graphic do you want me to get?
We're all about raw and real here, so...
Just always thought you've got to be a bit of an idiot to set off an IED, and then I went and set one off. The medics had declared me clinically dead. This is it, there's no way you're going to survive this. I went through 2 episodes of feeling suicidal. It was the strangest emotions that you wouldn't think, you know, fear, guilt, embarrassment, and anger. It's taken me a long time to get here, to feel comfortable with sharing these things. It could help so many people that it's almost my duty to do this.
Mark Ormrod, welcome to the Inspired By Show.
Chloe, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure to chat to you off camera and get to know you for getting you booked into the show. Mm-hmm. Now, for those people that don't know you, take me back to Christmas Eve, 2007.
It's a long time ago, wasn't it? Nearly 17 years. But on Christmas Eve 2007, I was serving with the Royal Marines. I was 24 years old, and I was halfway through a 6-month tour of Afghanistan. On Christmas Eve, I was second in command of a group of 8 men who were out on a routine foot patrol. There were 2 groups of us that left in the morning, 8 men in each group. And the idea of the patrol that we were on, it was very, very basic, very low-level stuff compared to what we'd done prior to Christmas Eve during that tour. And the idea basically was to get 2 groups of 8 men to go out the back door of the camp that we were working out of. One was going to go north and one was going to go south. We were told to patrol the immediate perimeter around our camp, pushing no more than 300 meters from the perimeter wall. And then those 2 groups would meet at the front entrance of camp, so now the opposite side, where we would finish up for the day, go back into camp, and then we were due to, you know, every couple of weeks you get like a mail drop, so we were due to go in and open our Christmas mail, have some Christmas lunch and that kind of stuff, and do what we could, given our situation, to try and enjoy the Christmas period. So when that time came, we were given the green light. They opened the back entrance of our camp. We left. I was second in command of the group that went north. The other guys went south. And we went out and we did what we were tasked to do. Probably 5, maybe 6 hours after we left, we then found ourselves at the opposite side of camp. So at the front entrance, ready to finish up for the day and go back into camp. And the group that I was in were positioned on this high piece of ground, what we called the North Fort. So that was one of our target indicators if we ever came into contact with the enemy. Now beneath that, as we were up there looking down, you could see most of the base that we were working out of, Forward Operating Base Robinson. And then down beneath that, just off to the side of the main dirt road that ran through the area, the 611, was that other group of men that we had left with earlier in the day. So tactically, we're in a very advantageous position because not only can we see everything around us, but when you're in a firefight, it's a lot easier to fight going down a hill than it is up. So our job in that instance was to provide protection for that other group of men because they're in a very vulnerable position, being so low down and in the open ground. So the guy in charge, a friend of mine called Corporal Sean Helsby, took his half of the section and started giving them fire positions. I took my half of the section, and about 5 meters in front of me, there was like a shallow bowl in the ground. So you got to imagine the terrain. We're up on the high ground, basically on a ridge line. There's not much cover that we could have used. Normally you want to get behind a building or a tree or a rock or a shrub or something that's going to give you what we call cover from view and cover from fire. But on this ridge line, all we really had was this shallow bowl in the ground. And in my mind, I thought, if we get in there, get on our stomachs. If anyone from the low ground is looking up, they're going to have a hard time to see us, which means they're going to have a hard time trying to engage with us and attack us with rockets and mortars or whatever it was that they were using. So given the terrain and situation, that to me was the best option to give these guys the best protection. So I jumped in, they all started taking their fire positions. I stood back for a little while. There were a couple of checks that I had to do to make sure that we were as well defended as we possibly could be. Then when they were happy and I was happy, I started slowly walking over towards the position that I selected for myself. And as I went to get down onto my stomach, I put my right knee on the floor, and that was the moment that I knelt on and detonated an improvised explosive device. Not my best Christmas. I do remember everything, and I'm happy to talk through that if you would like. How graphic do you want me to get?
We're all about raw and real here, so as graphic as you're comfortable with.
Okay. So you got to use your imagination and think a little bit about the environment that we're working in. So it's very sandy, very dusty. So when I knelt on this improvised explosive device and it exploded, this huge dust cloud was created. So temporarily, I couldn't see anything. I was blinded. I had no clue what I had done. There was no pain. There was no, obvious realization for me straight away that I had knelt on this improvised explosive device. And my first instinct was that we were being attacked. I thought someone had fired a rocket or a mortar bomb on our position. It had exploded nearby, and that's what the explosion was. So my gut instinct straight away was to find out where the attack came from, neutralize the threat, and then get all my friends out there as quickly as possible, hoping that nobody's going to be hurt or killed. Now, where I was positioning myself, where my fire position was, I knew, we'd been there 3 months. I knew that area intimately, that the ground and everything around me. I knew that from where I was and where I was facing, about 600 meters behind me, down on that low ground, there was a small rectangular forestry block, so a bunch of trees. And everything else around there was just flat mud fields, farmers' fields. So in my mind, I thought, okay, we're under attack. If anyone's got any sense, the only place they're going to attack us from is that small group of trees, because they can do what we call shoot and scoot, where they'll fire, hope that they hit us, and then leg it. So in my mind, I started saying to myself, turn around, Mark. Turn around, ID where the enemy is, and start shooting. When you start shooting, everyone else will start shooting, and then hopefully we can make some sort of tactical withdrawal, get out of there, find a better position to fight from, and then go and do what we got to do. Now, I can't see anything still because of this dust cloud. And this all happens very, very quickly. That trying to get a grasp on time isn't easy, but it was literally seconds from point of explosion to me wanting to ID the enemy to me trying to see where they were. Now, because I couldn't see anything, in my mind, I was just saying, Mark, turn around, crawl over to the other side of the bowl, ID where the enemy is, start shooting, and then get everyone out of there. Now, I probably told myself to turn around about 5 times in my mind before I realized that my body wasn't doing what my brain was telling it to do. And I didn't have any idea why that was happening. It was very confusing. You got to imagine my adrenaline spiked at this point, and there's a lot going on. So I thought, okay, what do I do here? The only thing I could do was wait. I thought I'll wait until this dust cloud settles, look around, see what's going on, assess the situation, make some decisions, and then figure out what to do. So I waited, and this dust cloud got to about chest height, and I looked around, and I was panicking. I was just praying that my friends were okay and no one had been hurt or killed, but I couldn't see any of them. I think they had been blasted out of the area. So I carried on waiting. Now, the dust cloud got about 6 inches from the floor, hit the ground, and eventually disappeared. And as it disappeared, I looked down to where my legs should have been, and they had both been pretty much completely ripped off from the knees down.
Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favour to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode.
Now, anyone listening to this, if they've been in a traumatic accident, they'll know exactly what I'm saying here, but it's a very surreal experience. So once this dust cloud settled, my adrenaline spiked and I'm panicking and I'm going through this range of thoughts, feelings and emotions. I looked down to where my legs should have been, they were gone, but I wasn't in any pain. And I think my brain really struggled to process what it was I was looking at, and it didn't feel real. I just remember sitting there for a couple of seconds looking and saying to myself, what are you looking at? Like, what? This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't compute. I can't process. I don't understand what's happening. Then I think because I wasn't in any pain, it kind of made it even more unbelievable. But I probably sat there for about 2, maybe 3 seconds at the most, and then thought about my team again. So I kind of snapped out of it, looked over my right shoulder to see if I could see any of the rest of the guys. And the guy who was in charge, Corporal Sean Helsby, was stood there. And the look on his face, he had no colour in his face. His eyes were like on stalks. And so I sat there thinking, what did I just look at? Why does he look that way? None of this is adding up. And I immediately went to look back to my legs, I think to kind of process and understand if this was actually happening. And as I got to about the 3 o'clock position, I saw my arm lying in the sand. Now from my bicep to my wrist, my entire arm had been kind of ripped open. The bones in the upper and lower part of my arm were shattered into a million pieces. My hand was still in quite good order, and I don't know why I did this, but I kind of picked my right hand up with my left hand, held it in front of my face, moved it around a little bit, and then dropped it into the sand. As I think at that moment, the realization of what had actually happened and the severity of what had actually happened all hit me at once. I knew then in that moment that we weren't under attack. I knew that I had detonated an improvised explosive device. And the reality of me surviving this situation was very, very slim. Now, if you could write down on paper what is the worst possible scenario you can imagine to evacuate a casualty from in the battlefield, then this was it. Right, so we're on high ground. This little shallow bow that I was in, we were working with some American Special Forces guys, and one of their jobs in a situation like this is to go in after and clear the area, and they write a report on it. So this little shallow bow that me and the lads were in was now, I think it was 12 feet deep by 15 feet around. There were 6 other improvised explosive devices around me, and they were anti-personnel mines with the warhead of a 107mm shoulder-launched rocket on top. So this was a pretty tricky situation to try and get me out of. It was made slightly more tricky by the fact that the way we are trained in that situation is to override every instinct you have as a human to try and help one of your friends, and we're trained not to go running in to give first aid because of the risk that you pose to yourself and to the casualty if you set off another device. So I was laying there in this huge crater surrounded by these other improvised explosive devices, bleeding out, knowing that my friends aren't going to come rushing in to rescue me because that's not what we're trained to do. So part of me thought, this is it. There's no way you're going to survive this. There was just too much blood and fluid coming out. Coupled with the fact that I knew it was going to be a lengthy evacuation, I thought, okay, this is my time. Now, the other part of me, at the back of my mind, I don't. It's hard to explain. I never genuinely thought I was going to die. I knew that those other 7 men would do whatever it took to get me out of there, and they would perform to the highest level, and they absolutely did. Like not one of them broke protocol. It's one thing being a casualty, right? But it's the other thing being the guys that have got to rescue the casualty and having to actually be in that situation and not freeze and not go running in and to stick to everything you've been trained to do. And they all did it perfectly. Like one of them was straight on the radio to headquarters, calling in a helicopter and a medic. I had a 19-year-old who I think was 8 weeks out of training on his stomach. And what his job was, as the guy closest to me, was to crawl with a bayonet, prod the ground, and then mark a safe route for when the medic gets to me to make sure that there are no other devices on that path. There was another guy coordinating all-round defense in case there was a small arms follow-up attack. And every single one of them just did it perfectly. And because of that, when the medic got to me, he got to me very, very quickly, started putting tourniquets on my legs. He got me to do the tourniquet up on my arm to keep me conscious because I was fading out at this point. And then when he deemed me stable, he pulled out a stretcher, which was like a tablecloth with some handles on because of this huge hole that we were in. And then he put his hands under my armpits and he dragged me over to the stretcher. Now, that was the first time since triggering the device that I felt any pain. So he put me down and I looked down to my right leg where the pain came from. And there was like a thin piece of rope or string covered in blood and sand and dirt coming out of my right leg. And so I followed it and it went into my boot. So I don't know why I did this, but I picked my boot up and I had a look inside and my foot was still in there. And I guess this piece of string or rope was like a nerve or a tendon. So where he had dragged me and with the weight of the boot and the foot, it had pulled this tendon and caused the pain. So he then had to take what was left of my right leg, what was left of my right arm, kind of just scoop them up and put them on my stomach, and then evacuate me out of this huge crater off this high ground down to the main dirt road and put me into the back of a vehicle. Now, when the vehicle was driving to the helicopter landing site, it started going up a hill, and the ground in Afghanistan is that there are no tarmac roads where we were. It was very, very pothole laden and just, rough terrain. So on the way up the hill to get into the front entrance of camp, the guy driving had to be quite aggressive with the way he was doing things. And he hit a pothole and the medic fell out the back. And then I fell out the back. But as the bottom of my back hit the tailgate of the vehicle, the driver swung around, reached out, grabbed whatever he could grab to kind of hold me in the vehicle and ended up grabbing the femur bone that was in my right leg. Now, he left the medic because that other group of men that we were with were at the bottom of the hill. So there was 8 heavily armed men there to protect him. He drove me to the helicopter landing site. And the last thing that I can remember is a Chinook helicopter landing, a sandstorm that's created from the propeller blades, and then the heat of this exhaust beating down on me in the back of this vehicle. And that was a minute when I blacked out and then later found out that the medics had declared me clinically dead at the scene.
Wow.
An intense Christmas.
Oh my gosh. Well, Mark, thank you for sharing that so vividly and openly. And I think it's one of those things that when you go through it, no one can ever imagine what it's like going through that. When you joined the Royal Marines and you said that, people are trained and you're trained for these situations, did it ever cross your mind at that point that this could actually happen to you?
Not really. And to be honest, when we were deployed, me and the lads had a lot of conversations about this. And we actually said, you've got to be pretty dumb to set off an improvised explosive device because the ground, it's not like sand at a beach, right? It's quite hard, compact sand that, and terrain that we're working in. So if someone had been digging there, it would be pretty obvious that they've been digging there. But I think what happened is where we were in this bowl, the days prior to us patrolling, where it had rained at night, had smoothed out the surface. So there was literally no ground sign that these things were there. And like I said earlier, there were 6 or 7 of them in that area. I think the only reason I detonated it, I used to carry a lot of ammunition with me on patrols. And my mindset was, if we get in a firefight, I can get rid of this ammunition pretty easy. But if I run out, I'm in trouble. I was 6'2" and 16 stone anyway. I was probably carrying 4 or 5 stone in equipment on most patrols. So I was very, very heavy. I think that's the reason that I detonated it. But we talked about it and said, you got to be pretty dumb to set these things off. maybe I'm dumb, I don't know.
Oh
But
my
I set one off. And because we get trained to go like toe to toe with people, and that's what we do. So this was always our biggest fear, I think, was being injured or killed by an improvised explosive device. And they started to get nastier and nastier as the tour went on. You know, we were able to find ones that were, you know, using metal and nails and bits. So they started changing stuff, using more plastics, needles, glass, that kind of stuff. So, you know, it got trickier as you went on. But yeah, I just always thought you've got to be a bit of an idiot to set off an IED. And then I went and set one off.
Oh my gosh. And did you ever look back on that? You know, when you came round, when you found out that's what it was, because you said that you thought it was by the time that you sort of like got aware of what was going on. When you were then in your recovery, did you ever look back and feel that, like feel, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot? Or was it just a completely different experience to what you thought it would be like?
I felt it in the moment. You know, a lot of people say, what were you thinking when all that was going on? And they assume that you would be fearful of dying and you would be panicking. And honestly, my first thought when I understood what I'd done was guilt. And the reason I say it was guilt was because tactically what usually happens is you'll set off an IED. The enemy then knows that all your friends are going to come and help you, and they usually run over the brow of a hill with AK-47s or something and then kill everybody. So my first instinct was everyone's going to die and it's my fault. I mean, it literally seconds later, my thoughts started changing when I knew that wasn't going to happen. I started thinking back to my daughter. Yeah, my eldest daughter, Kezia, was 2 at the time. And I thought, if I survive this, I'm never going to have a relationship with her because she'll get bullied because of me. I won't be able to go to Christmas plays or sports days or any of this stuff because kids are mean and kids will pick on her. Someone's going to be burdened with me because I didn't know what my life was going to be like. I didn't even know if I was going to survive it, but I thought if I do, obviously I'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Someone's going to have to wash me and feed me. So I started feeling quite guilty because of that. Then I was embarrassed and ashamed because of those conversations we had, like, you got to be the dummy to set off the IED. So it was never fear of dying because I knew that those guys would look after me. It was the strangest emotions that you wouldn't think, you know, fear, guilt, embarrassment, and anger at doing it.
And how did other people react? Because you talked about it there. You were worried about how your daughter would feel. You were worried about what it would be like for her at school, your friends, their health, their safety. How was everybody else's reactions to what happened?
Everyone was great, if I'm honest. I think I was overthinking it. Everyone was incredibly supportive. You know, I was the UK's first triple amputee, I think, since the First World War. So going through hospital and rehab was very difficult because there were no processes or procedures in place. So everyone around me just kind of rallied together to help get me through those early days until I got to rehab, and then, you know, set myself a plan of how I was going to regain my independence and learn to walk again. But all the way along, you know, even now to today, everyone has been super supportive. People just wanted to see me succeed, I think.
Wow. And what was it? How did your family react to it? You know, I can imagine it must have been quite a daunting Christmas for them as well to experience this.
In the beginning, in hospital, I think it was all very false. Like, and I don't mean it in a bad way. My mindset was, I need to be positive for them because they're probably going through some rough times too. And I think that they thought the same, was like, even if they weren't feeling great, they had to be positive for me to get me. We never talked about it. It just kind of happened. And those first 6 weeks in hospital, I think we just faked our way through it. And we're like, oh yeah, no, life's great. You know, let's watch a DVD and get a KFC. And, you know, while I'm lying in a hospital bed. And no one ever talked about it. We just did it. But it worked. It got us through that. And then when I got to rehab, it changed. And, you know, the positivity and the support and the motivation leveled up, but it was real at that point because I'd started setting goals, and it wasn't about just survival at that point. It was about dominating this, regaining my independence, and then reclaiming my life.
One of the things I really value from you, Mark, from the research I've done and listening to podcasts you've done before and getting to know you, is you're such a driven person. You know, from what I've heard and from getting to know you, you've never sat there and gone, pity me, victim mode, and so on. Have you always been like that, or do you think this was a defining part to that journey for you?
I've always had a drive in me since I was about 12. I won't go into the whole backstory, but I got bullied for being overweight when I was a kid in the mid to late 90s before the internet. So I taught myself how to get fit by saving up my dinner money to buy magazines and read the articles back to back. And pretty much from then, I've just had this kind of victor rather than victim mentality. And it served me really well. It got me through a lot when I was a kid. It got me through Royal Marines training, and it got me through my rehab to get my life to where it is now. But I think what I find really useful in a lot of stuff I do is I make it about other people and the bigger picture and not myself. So there was a moment when I was in hospital. I spent 6 weeks in hospital, and I was about 5 weeks into my stay. And I was visited by the Commandant General of the Royal Marines and the Corps Regimental Sergeant Major. So the two most senior men, officer and enlisted men in the Royal Marines. And the Corps Regimental Sergeant Major, back in 2002 when I was a young Marine, was the Regimental Sergeant Major of the unit that I was at. Now, the short version of this story is we call it getting charged if you're in trouble. So I was in front of him with my heels together getting charged. I think I'd been fighting or something stupid downtown. But I'd cut the lining out of my beret, and it was one of the things he hated. So when I stood in front of him, he could see that I didn't have a lining there. So he took it off me, pinned it on his notice board, sent me into town to get a new beret, and I had to wear that one. Now, this was probably 6 months after I finished my training. So I was a young Marine. He was a senior guy in the military, and we hadn't seen each other since. When he came to visit me in hospital, he brought me my beret and he remembered it. And I remember sitting there thinking, how does a guy this established, this experience, remember an idiot like me? Because he must have had hundreds of guys stood in front of him over the years that he'd done the same thing to. And it really impacted me. And I remember lying there thinking, this is what the Royal Marines is about. You know what I mean? We're a small group of men, close-knit, family-focused kind of organization. So when I leave hospital, when I go to rehab, when I'm in rehab, I'm going to be in a tri-service environment. So I'll be surrounded by Navy, Army, Air Force, and Royal Marines. And I never really worked in that environment before, but my mindset was I'm going to go to rehab and I'm going to show them what being a Royal Marine is about. You know what I mean? I may not be able to be one physically anymore, but I can still be one mentally. And I can take the standards, the values, the lessons, the learnings that I've got from that and apply it to my rehabilitation. So that's what I did. From day one that I got to rehab, I had my goals set. I had my plans set. I briefed my entire team about what I wanted to do and how I needed their support. And we just hit the ground running from day one. You know, it was all about setting a goal, creating a plan, and then taking action on it. And I didn't really have time to sit and dwell on my situation. All I was doing was focusing on moving forward. And with those people around me continually supporting me, it made the whole thing, it was a lot of fun. Bizarrely, the whole process was a lot of fun. And I always just found myself in a position where I was aiming for the next thing and aiming for the next thing and aiming for the next thing. And it put me on a path that I'm fortunate enough to still be on now, to this day.
That's a huge part of your journey, though. You've continued to support the Royal Marines and you still, even now, sat here, are so passionate about what they stand for. At any point, Mark, did you regret enlisting, or did you regret like dedicating your life to that sort of cause?
No, not at all. Someone said to me once, and this is something that's always stuck with me, just because you stop wearing a uniform, it doesn't mean you stop being a Royal Marine or Army, Navy, whatever it is, or police officer, you know, whatever it is, it's part of who you are. The biggest thing is your mind and how you develop your mindset when you're going through the training, the deployments, the operations, the exercises, and all that kind of stuff. And in my mind, it's a gift. It's a gift that they gave me while I was in training, and it's something that I'm very grateful for. So I would never regret having signed up, having deployed, having been injured. It took me on this journey to where I am, and I now have a very exciting and fulfilling life that lets me do lots of cool stuff just like this. So yeah, I'm grateful.
Wow. And that's the thing I find fascinating about you, Mark, because you are such a positive person. And some could say that that's because you've been through what you've been through, that you've come out the side, and gratitude is a huge part of that. But there's two levels to this. There's going through what you went through and healing, but then there's talking about it and sharing it. When did you decide to actually start talking about your journey and you have become a huge advocate?
First of all, I think it's important to say that, there's only so much we can talk about in an hour. So I need to be very honest in the fact that in the beginning, I went through 2 episodes of feeling suicidal. I spent sometimes at night crying. I lost my temper, spat my dummy out, had temper tantrums, was rude and aggressive and angry with people. But I think looking back, that's all just a natural part of the process when you go through something that traumatic. So it wasn't just like I woke up in the morning and said, give me my legs, get out my way, I'm going to go and conquer the world. There were some extreme lows during that, but I think they're all, a natural part of the process. As far as, talking about it and sharing the story, I'm a big fan of social media. I've been on it for nearly 16 years now. All the different platforms in various different guises, and over that time I've had a lot of people DM me, email me, with their stories, and I've tried to help them with their stories and overcome their limiting beliefs and move forward with their life. But I've also had a lot of people message me saying, I was going through this, I saw what you do, it changed my perspective, my mindset, now I'm at this point, thank you for sharing. And so then you almost kind of feel, I was going to say obligated. It's a privilege to be able to share it and spread that message and get the message out to people because of the positive effect that it has. So I kind of feel it's my duty now just to keep on, not just sharing my story, but sharing my mindset and the way I think and the way I act and the things that I do, because, they've led me to this incredible life that I'm grateful for despite all the trauma, and I think it can do the same for other people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really value, Mark, how you clarified that at the beginning, because I think a lot of people go on podcasts and they tell what's known as rags to riches story. This happened to me, this was bad, now I'm a millionaire and things are great,
Yeah.
And actually it's never a straight line.
No.
We always have our wobbles, and I think it's good that we do talk about them, like we said off camera. This is a very open show, it's a very talk about exactly what you're thinking. What has frustrated you on your journey, of whether it's part of your recovery or talking about your story? Has there been anything that's stood out that maybe challenged you more than you expected, or a reaction from someone that wasn't what you were hoping for?
So quite early on in my rehab, let me just rewind. I've kind of always known since I was a kid that if I wanted to excel at something or achieve something, the quickest and easiest way to do it is to get a mentor, right? Find someone who's been there, done it, come out the other side. So right away, when I was in hospital in those first 6 weeks, I got online and started looking for somebody in the wild who was a triple amputee, who was living their life. And I found someone quite quickly in America, a guy called Cameron Clapp, who was hit by a train in 2002 and became a triple amputee. And he was out there living without a wheelchair, without carers. He was doing all these things that I was really struggling to do, and that my team in the UK were telling me wasn't possible. So I showed him the videos and was met with some negativity and told that they were green screened and they weren't real. It's impossible to do that with the level of injuries that you two have. And it irritated me. Now, the short version of this story is I reached out to Cameron, asked if I could go to America to meet him and train with him and his team. They agreed. I was denied by the military. So after a couple of weeks of waking up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, having conversations with my wife, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Because I'm in the military, right? And you've got to do what you're told. Eventually, after about 2 weeks, me and my wife both agreed that even though I'll probably get in trouble, in 10 years' time, none of these people will be in my life. And if I don't go out to meet this guy to learn from him, I'll regret it. So on the 9th of June 2009, I jumped on a plane, went AWOL from the military, went and met Cameron and his team and spent 3 weeks going through this intense boot camp of physical training. And it changed my life. You know, 9th of June 2009 was the last time I ever used a wheelchair. But what frustrated me was the lack of open-mindedness from people. You know, I'm like, there's this group of people over in America that are doing phenomenal things that we're struggling to do. Why don't we go and learn from them? Because also at this point, although I was the first triple amputee, I think by the time I left in July 2010, there were 33 triple amputees. So the benefit of what we could learn could be passed down to all those, not just triple amputees, but double amputees, even single amputees. You know, everybody could have benefited from us going out there and working with these guys. So I just went anyway. And like I said, it changed my life. I haven't used a wheelchair now, I think it's in over 14 years. I think this year it's 15 years. And I did actually get the Americans to come over. They did a bit of training with some of our guys. And I saw men and women achieving in 6 months what it took me 18 months to do because of that increase in knowledge and that mentoring. So that's what frustrated me in the beginning was I put it down to ego, you know, and not being willing to go, oh, they can do it better than us. We need to learn from them. That really frustrated me in the beginning. But it frustrates me as well on a bigger scale with humans. Humans limit themselves. I think their egos tell them they can't do this, they can't do that. They're not good enough for this, not good enough for that. And it infuriates me. I'm just like, have some confidence in yourself, have some self-belief, go out and do it. Do you know what I mean? Just if you can't, just try it. Just try things, figure them out. Because if I didn't go to America, if I didn't try this, then I'd be in a wheelchair now. And I'd probably be overweight. I'd be miserable. I'd be living on welfare. You know what I mean? Instead of traveling the world, doing my thing. You just got to have a little bit of self-belief. So if you're listening and you want to do something, go and do it.
Yes, Mark, I love that. I think that's the key though, isn't it? A lot of people, there is almost like a closed-mindedness of ego, they know it better, or I know better, or worse, fear.
Yeah. And I was on a Tony Robbins course a long time ago, and he summed it up for me perfectly when he said, like, when you're a baby, you probably heard this, right? When babies learn to walk, they get up and they fall and they laugh, but they don't go, you know what, I failed there. Maybe this walking thing isn't for me. And then they spend the rest of their life crawling around the planet because we'd all look pretty silly. They don't understand the concept of failure. It's not till you get older and you get beaten down by the world that you're like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe that person's special. Or, you know, I'll just settle into the norm and live this normal 9-to-5 life. I just wish more people would flip their mindset and be like, go back to that kind of baby mentality. If I can do anything, you know, if I fail, I learn from it, and then I move on. You know, and then I think we'd all be, you know, a lot more fulfilled in what we do.
Yeah, definitely. And your mindset there, Mark, 'cause obviously you had it from a child anyway, but I would say it's massively developed as you've gone through your own journey, going through Tony Robbins training as well. How has what you've been through and the mindset you've got affected your family, you know, your wife, your kids? Would you say they've changed?
So I don't know if they've changed, because my eldest daughter was 2 and my other 2 children weren't born when I was injured. So they've all kind of grown up with me the way I am. But I think as a father, you can tell your children things, but I think it's important that you show them too. So I can sit here and tell you I haven't used a wheelchair for 14 years, but they live with me. They know there's not one in my house. They see me crawling around on my bum, jumping over the bath, jumping on the toilet, jumping into my bed. They see me standing on the end of my legs to reach stuff up the cupboards in the kitchen. They see me, you know, helping out with housework and doing everything that a normal able-bodied man does. I don't just talk to them about it. They see me doing it. So I think they're going to grow up with that mindset of, you know, there's nothing we really can't do. We just got to figure out a way, adapt ourselves and you know, do it the way that works for us. You know, and that's what I hope anyway. You know, there's a lot of responsibility being a parent. And we never get it 100% right, but we do the best that we can do and just hope it all works out.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's somewhat responsibility being a partner as well, right? Because, you know, when you're married to someone, people have this vision of, we're going to get married and we're going to have this family and so on, and it's all going to be the straight and narrow, or so it seems at the wedding planning stages. Yeah. Obviously, things change. How was your relationship going through that? And did you ever honestly, did you ever have the conversation with your wife, which is like, look, I get it. Like, if you don't want to be part of this, because I can imagine some people feel like like you said, you felt guilty for people in your team and so on.
Yeah. So when I met my wife, she's from Surrey, I'm from Plymouth. She came to Plymouth to finish her degree with 5 of her friends. At that point, my eldest daughter's from a previous relationship. So I had left the military for a year, retrained as a bodyguard, but was working as a nightclub doorman when we met. So she was 21, I was 24. I had a child from a previous relationship. We'd been together a year before I deployed. Then I lost 3 limbs. So she had no reason to stick around. She had her whole life ahead of her, just out of university. And then, this may not be the right way to word it, but then she's lumbered with me, right? So no one would have blamed her if she went, do you know what? You're a lovely guy, but this isn't for me. And then she went back and lived her life. But she didn't. She stuck around. And, 15 years this year we've been married. And I feel very fortunate to have found her because, and a lot of the time this doesn't get spoken about, like the home team that are holding things down where, you're out doing your thing and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And she lets me be me and she gives me the space I need to be me. And in return, I try to provide and protect and build a future for us all. And it just works between us, like yin and yang almost, you know what I mean? And I don't take that for granted either, because it's very, very difficult to find. And I'm very lucky that I found it in Becky. And we have a great life. It's hard to explain. It's just fun. You know what I mean? We do our thing and I don't ever have to worry about coming home and getting an earful of, abuse. Where have you been? Why are you doing this? You're 5 minutes late. She just lets me be me and do my thing, and I'm very grateful for that.
Wow. I think there's so much to say about that because, there's the physical challenges that go through that, but there's also the mental challenges that come through it, Whether people have had a physical illness or a mental illness, I often believe that we can rely on our loved ones a lot when we're going through challenges. And I've myself had suicidal tendencies and had some serious lows. And if it wasn't for my friends and family, there's no reason I'd be sat here, to be really honest with you. But I also think, from my experience, and I don't know what you would say, Mark, it's harder being the person helping the person struggling than it is the person struggling. I found it, yes, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but when I've had loved ones who have struggled, I find it harder because you don't understand, you can't feel, you can't hear, you can't see what's going on in their minds. You don't know what mood they're going to be in when they wake up.
Yeah.
What would you say about that sort of concept?
I would say that you're absolutely right. And literally just this morning, and I get this a lot, I had a woman message me whose son has just lost a leg. And she's like, I don't know what to do. How do I talk to him? I want him to talk to you and meet you. So I messaged her back and I said, look, in my experience, everyone deals with this differently. When he's ready, he'll be ready. When he's ready, give me a call. I don't ever want to be that guy that comes barging in your hospital room going, life's going to be great because it's great for me, because people just deal with things differently. But I absolutely understand what you're saying. It's difficult because you don't know what's in their head. Doesn't matter if you've lived with them every day for 40 years and you know them intimately, you still don't know 100% about the way they think and what they need when they need it. I think in those situations, for me, I just have to let the person know that I'm there when they need me, and I'll continue as normal, and I will give them a little bit of leeway if their behavior is a little bit different. But and it is hard. It can be draining. You've just got to keep going. I'm here for you, dude. I'm here for you. You know what I mean? When you need me, just let me know. But, I wish we could just wave a magic wand and make it all better, but it's not that easy. So I completely get what you're saying and where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is not knowing how to react or act around the person. Again, I can only relate to the mental side of it. But, when I was diagnosed with severe clinical depression, I was unable to work for about 6 months. Everyone I spoke to, my close friends and family, just looked at me different, looked at me like I was injured, looked at me like I was broken, and not knowing. I remember one friend said to me, oh, I thought you'd be crying when I saw you. I'm not always emotional, I'm just sick. It's a different type of thing. How did you find that going through both the physical and the mental side of people looking at you differently, treating you differently?
Do you know what's funny? I found it really hard to go home so I live in Plymouth and my rehab was in London, and I could go anywhere in the world, but I always struggled to go home for that reason, because I felt everyone looked at me differently and acted differently around me, and I didn't want that. And I just wanted people to treat me the way that they did treat me before, and also not be like in their head going, oh, do I ask him if he wants help? Like, if I want help, absolutely, give it to me. I'm not going to bite your head off for asking me if I need help. I never would have done that before. I'm not going to do it after. But yeah, I've struggled with that, being around people that knew me. And I think because they knew me from before, in the beginning for me, it was massively a physical thing. You know, my whole identity was wrapped up in being big and strong and fit. And then now I felt weak and fragile and small. I didn't really want my friends and family to see me like that. I wanted them to see me when I was up walking and strong again. So yeah, it was really difficult for me, but also for them. Because like you experienced, they treat you a little bit differently. They'll maybe read a book on clinical depression and go, oh, maybe she's got to cry all the time. That's not the way it works, you know? Yeah, it's difficult for everybody, isn't it? Whether it's physical or mental.
Yeah, definitely. And I find it's, even if you go through it yourself, like I get a lot of people messaging me about depression and they've like, I've struggled with depression for years. I've read your book and I find it really inspiring. I'm actually not the best person to speak to about it though, because I struggle, because everyone's depression is different. It's, and I'm sure physical side as well, right? Everyone can cope differently. Everyone will have different challenges. You know, I talk about mental fitness and physical fitness, like it's still a level of fitness. And I think I do look at, I've done a lot of work on my mental health since going through it, probably more than I ever would have. I've probably overcompensated on the personal development, on the well-being, the meditations, the journaling, everything, to just make sure that I'm preparing myself for if it happens again, or, you know, my own health. I'm curious for you, Mark, because you're always very into your fitness physically before. You haven't let this stop you. You've continued to go on a huge fitness journey. When did you decide to take that step as a triple amputee to still really push your fitness? I mean, you've done the Invictus Games, you've won some incredible awards and so on. Was it a given? Was it like a moment, oh, I'm a triple amputee, I'm going to take this next challenge? Or was it a journey for you to make that decision?
It was a journey. When I was in hospital, it was one of the things that, despite everything going on, one of the things that I found hardest to accept was that I couldn't train anymore. Only because I didn't know any better back then, right? And I was like, that's the thing that used to dominate my thoughts, is like, I can't lift weights anymore. I can't be strong anymore. I can't swim, run, or any of these things anymore. And it got me depressed, and until I got to rehab and started trying to figure it out. But then it was a case of, because everything was adapted, and I had such a fixed mindset of how a fit person should be, how they should look, how they should train. Because everything was adapted and was new to me, I didn't like it in the beginning. I'm like, well, I look like a weirdo doing it this way, and people look at me funny. And I'm very lucky that, you know, I had a friend who used to own a gym in Plymouth, and he gave me a key. And I used to go in there at 5 o'clock in the morning before it opened. Because if I got into a machine to do like 3 sets of, I don't know, chest press or whatever, I didn't want to get out the machine between sets, because it took me so much effort to get in it, and I didn't want to also be in a busy gym and hog the equipment. So I'd go in at 5 in the morning with different prosthetics and different setups and just play around for about 6 months when there was no one in there. And I figured out a bunch of like core routines that worked for me. And then for me, it was just an ego thing of getting over people staring at me and the way I do things differently, and just thinking I don't care anymore. Like, I've got back what I thought I'd lost in my life, and I like that. And if I like it, I'm going to do it more. And if people stare, I don't care. I'm just going to do my thing. And, you know, the physical health and mental health go hand in hand. You know what I mean? I think that's been one of my biggest successes is knowing that, and still training, you know, nearly every day if I can, at whatever level. It could be an hour, it could be 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. As long as my body's moving, that means that my brain's doing its thing, and I'm on track, and I'm feeling good. And, you know, you just want, I think ego, I've said this, ego a million times since we've been talking. I think once you can just put that to the side and get over yourself and just do what works, then the world changes.
Yeah, totally. You look at it through a different lens, don't you?
Yeah.
And I would say, my friends and family would say pre-depression and what happened to me, I was probably quite, I wouldn't say direct, but I was always very like, wanted the quick results, wanted the actions, but also had very short fuse. So I had like no tolerance for lack of respect. Like if I saw bad customer service, even if it wasn't me being treated badly, if I saw a waitress getting shouted at, I couldn't keep my mouth shut.
Right.
I'd have to go over and go, like, I don't think they deserve that. Whereas I'd say I'm a lot calmer now, because I've worked on my own mindset and actually realized everyone's got their own shit going on. You know, you never really know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think, Mark, there's so much more to you than what happened to you. And I know that you've talked about it so openly, and we joked off camera, you know, we often tell ourselves, have to tell the story so many times. Yeah. But there's so much more that you've been working on. What's next for you, and what's your real passion and drive now?
So I turned 40 last year. And for the previous 15 years, I dedicated my life to raising money for military charities. I think I did, we're somewhere like 5.6 million or something now over those years. And I decided, initially I thought it was selfish, but now I don't. I've decided now for the next 10 years, from 40 to 50, just to focus on me, business, entrepreneurship, and earning money for me and my family, because I've done the complete opposite for the last 15 years. So I want to get into more, all this stuff like podcasting, writing, TV, creating some businesses, going out there and just, you know, expanding my empire, if you will. Purely, really, the motivation behind it was as a challenge to see if I could. I feel like I've ticked so many boxes over the years, but I suck at this area of my life, of business and earning money. Now I want to see if I can change that and dominate that, because I think, and this has been a journey for me to even say this, I think it could be quite inspiring for someone if they see a guy with 4 fingers and a thumb and a smartphone creating a couple of businesses that earn huge amounts of money. They could look at that and go, well, what excuse do I have? This guy's got one hand, one phone, and he's done it by utilizing technology and being resourceful. So any of us can. And it feels like it's the last little piece of my puzzle. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on business and, you know, making money, as cringy as that sounds. And I'll probably give most of it away.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Just give it to causes and stuff. But I want to challenge myself and try and inspire people along the way.
I think it's so good. And I appreciate the honesty, because a lot of people, like you say, it feels cringy. A lot of people feel like money's bad, or like I can't talk about money. But think about all the money you've raised for charity. It wasn't bad then, you know. And actually, I love the angle of, you know, one hand on a smartphone and look what you can create. Yeah. Obviously, you've been on your journey sharing podcasts and stories. I mean, when I was doing my research, you've been sharing messages for years before you really took this leap into your own businesses. And one of them was through a book. So you wrote your first book, Man Down, quite a while ago now.
2009 it was published.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And obviously that's more the journey of what you've been through, your own story. And obviously I know you've got a big vision to write more books, do TV. What would be the next book that you'd love to write, and why?
I think the one that could launch me into the mainstream a bit more would be my autobiography. So Man Down touches on Afghanistan. But when I was listening to David Goggins' book, when he starts at his childhood, I touched on it earlier, being overweight, getting bullied, teaching myself to train. You know, I would like to write an entire autobiography that talks about all of that, getting into martial arts, joining the Marines, then getting injured, and cover a bit of Man Down, but then all the stuff after it, the rehab, the overcoming it, the getting a mentor, the not having a wheelchair, the Invictus, all this stuff. Because I think there's parts of my journey that can apply to most people's lives. You know, whether it's physical or mental, it's not like unique to me. That's what got me about when I read David Goggins' book. I thought, this is phenomenal. Like, this guy speaks to most people through his journey and his story. So I like to do that. And then a couple of like kind of personal development style books, getting into my mindset and, you know, delving a little bit deeper into that and how I think and strategies I use and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Same with podcasts, you know, share that information on podcasts. I'd like to make a movie. I got a million things that I want to do, and it's hard work, because we talked about off camera. People think that, you know, you just become this overnight success and it's easy, but it's not. It's 15, 16 years in the making now of grinding, traveling, working, kicking down doors, getting told no, falling on my face, getting back up. but we'll get there. We will get there. And then, it's exciting to think about it. Life's a journey, right? You talked earlier about how you used to be and how you are now. I just love people that can do that and reflect on their evolution and how far they've come and the extreme lows and the highs and be proud of themselves. You know, this whole thing's a journey. And if I can get to the end of my journey, my goal is 115 years old. If I can get to 115 years old and I've created this phenomenal legacy along the way that far outlives me, then I'll be a happy man.
Wow. Why 115? Just out of curiosity.
No idea. Just sounds like a cool number, 115. I don't got this vision of me laying there in my comfortable bed, you know, surrounded by kids, grandkids, great grandkids, and, you know, really key people in my life, of just it being a happy occasion where I drift off peacefully and they go, he had a cool time. I don't know why 115, but that's what we're aiming for.
I love that. I love that. And one of the things I really value about your books that you want to write, Mark, and the movies and so on, is because I think a lot of people can write personal development books. I mean, I'm a book publisher. I probably get pitched a personal development book
I bet, yeah.
weekly, right? From someone that's had a wobble in their life, become a life coach, and now wants to write a book. And by the way, I'm not dissing that. That was my first book.
Right.
So I know that journey. But I think there's something special about your journey, not just from your injury, but the journey you've been on since then, you know, like going against what the military were telling you and going to get a mentor, like, you know, breaking the rules for the right reasons.
Right.
And I think people will read it and go, you know, I see a lot of coaches say, you know, do these steps. And then you've got people who are worse off go, well, it's easy for you to say. I don't feel like you'll get the same reaction of it's easy for you to say.
I hope not. But and I never try to come at things from that angle. When I go, well, look at me, I've got 3 limbs missing and I did it. I never would ever come at it from that angle. But yeah, that's kind of in a way the mindset I want people to have. As we talked about with the business just now, I want them to look and go, damn, he overcame that. And this is why I want to do all these things, to share my story in detail, like the lowest points of my life and the biggest struggles, and really dig into how hard this is to be me on a daily basis, and then share the other things that I want to do. So, you know, just to kind of inspire people. You know, it's taken me a long time to get here, to feel comfortable with sharing these things. Normally I'm not into that, but like I said, I kind of feel now like it could help so many people that it's almost my duty to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the word duty there. And like you say, when you experienced your injury, you were the first in the UK for a very long time. Then obviously within your 6 weeks there, or 6 months, it had been significant more. How many more triple amputees, double amputees, single amputees, or even other injuries, mental or physical, are there going to be in the time that they could learn from you? Yeah.
And do you know what I really love is, it's not just military, it's not just the UK. Like literally last night there was a guy, I forget what country he's from, it's a third world country. He got electrocuted and lost both his arms and both his legs. And he's been messaging me on Instagram in broken English for months and months and months. And he asked me for some measurements of these short legs I have. So I took some photos, sent him measurements. And then 2 days ago he sent me this video, and his children had chopped up a bed, like took the legs off a bed, and they had created not an exact replica, but what they could with what they had of the short legs that I had. And he was walking around his house and he was like, thank you so much, you helped me, you send me measurements, my children make me legs. And he was walking, and I was like, this is cool. Do you know what I mean? But before that, he was just sat down, didn't have a wheelchair because he couldn't, well, I was going to say he couldn't afford one. I don't think they actually have them where he comes from. And now he's walking. You know, it's cool. It's so cool.
Wow.
His name's Elvis.
Well, let's shout out to Elvis.
Yeah, right. It's cool.
That's incredible. And that's the thing though, isn't it? A lot of people slate social media and they're like, oh, everyone shows the selfie version, the filtered version, the happy, you know, the great side of it. But it also connects us. Like there's no other way you would have been able to find that story and inspire him, share that information for him to then go on literally change his life. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's up to you how you use social media. I choose to use it for good. I curate all my timelines to get rid of all the negativity and the rubbish and the whinging and moaning. So every time I log on to one of my platforms, it's just positivity in my face all the time. You know what I mean? I try to encourage other people to do that too. If you're going to be on it for hours a day, at least make sure that if you're not creating content, you're consuming some wholesome stuff rather than all the negative stuff.
Yeah, because we're a sponge, right? Like always be inspired by positive people
Right.
and learn from them. Like you mentioned David Goggins, you know, reading his book, your mentor, even back then. Who else has inspired you? Or is there anyone that you've met or you've wanted to meet and you've gone, oh, I'd love to meet that person, or I'm inspired by that person?
I'm going to do a big name drop now.
Oh,
so
go on.
I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, like a lot of men and maybe women of my era. Arnie was the man. And I got to meet him 2 weekends ago. And there's just, do I have time to share a quick story?
Yeah, of course.
So in 2010, I was asked when I left the military to be part of a team that ran across America. We were going to go from New York to LA, 3,500 miles, raising money for military charities. When we were going to finish in LA, it was going to be on Veterans Day. And I'm pretty sure at the time, Arnie was the governor down there. So it was likely he was going to be there. I agreed to do this under the condition that the only thing I wanted was to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger at the finish line. Anyway, after 3.5 months of running, the day came. And, you know, I don't like to say too much negative stuff, but the leader of the group had flown his girlfriend of 3 weeks out to meet us for the finish, got up early on the day of the finish to impress her and took her instead of me. So I was understandably, I think, upset that I didn't get to meet him. But my friend Sam, who's a retired Royal Marine, who is the founder of Reorg, the charity that I'm a trustee of, when I told him this story, he kind of got a bee in his bonnet. I'm not sure why, but he's like, I'm going to make this happen. And for 4 years, we've been going to the Arnold Schwarzenegger Fitness Expo in Birmingham with the charity to raise money and awareness. And then this year he came, and Sam made it happen. We went to the gym when he was training in the morning, got to infiltrate his inner circle, got to shake his hand and tell him how much of an inspiration he was to me. And then, yeah, fulfilled that childhood dream.
Wow.
You know, it was a really cool moment.
Oh my gosh. And what was it like meeting him? Was it what you thought it would be like?
It was very, I always want to be respectful of these people's times because I have a very small understanding of how stressful it can be when, you know, you're the one that everyone is around and there's cameras and everything. So I just wanted to tell him, you know, how much of an inspiration he was to me, shake his hand, and then I just left. I was like, thank you, that's all I want, and then left. But yeah, I mean, you have this image in your mind, I think, of these people that you look up to, and he very much lived up to that for me. You know what I mean? He was great.
Yeah, I think that's such an inspiring story, and I'm so glad you shared that, because a lot of people say, like, don't meet your heroes. I've heard that so many times. You know, you build people onto a pedestal and then they don't turn out to be what you hoped. But it's really nice to hear that actually it did live up to it. And also shout out to your friends for still making it happen. Once Sam gets a bee in his bonnet about something, he'll move heaven and earth to make it happen. And you know, it took 4 years, but he did it. He made it happen. Oh, that's incredible. I'm so glad, Mark.
Yeah, me too.
I've had such a great time talking to you on here. You said then if we got time, I'm like, I think we could just carry on and just keep going. But obviously I do want to be respectful of your time as well. So thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
We have one final question that we ask all our guests on the show. So who do you know that has an inspiring story that you think we should have on the show next?
So I have a friend, a little boy called Tony. I can give you his contact details after. Tony Huggle. He is phenomenal. My only concern is you probably won't get him sat still for very long. He's got a lot of energy. He's so cool. But he's got a very inspiring story, as does his mum. They would be great guests. They're phenomenal people.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mark. We'll make that happen. Well, Mark, that's literally all we've got time for now. So thank you so much for sharing. Obviously, do come back when you have your many, many books out there and all of your TV and movies that are coming up. And then we'll see how you get on. So thank you so much. Thank you, Chloe. I really appreciate you giving me the time. No problem at all. Well, that's all that we've got time for now. So thank you all for tuning in. I mean, wow, what an inspiring story that we've had there from Mark. It has been incredible. And I hope you took as much as I took from this interview. If you haven't already, make sure you do share in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, what was the most inspiring part of this episode that's inspired you to go on and change something in your life. Make sure you do share us in the comments, and no matter you're watching on YouTube, listening on Apple, Spotify, or any of the other platforms, do make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on our next inspiring guest. I'll see you next week.